Yeah, please start. I think.
Okay, ma'am, principal আছেন তো?
হ্যাঁ স্যার আছেন।
ম্যামও আছেন।
Sir is there.
Well, a very good afternoon and heartfelt greetings to all assembled dignitaries, distinguished guests, eminent speakers, colleagues, teachers, research scholars, and students. This is Dr. Rukhsana Begum, Associate Professor and Head, Department of Geography, Barasat Government College. On behalf of the organizing committee, it's my pleasure to announce that on the occasion of the World Environment Day, the Department of Geography and IQAC, Barasat Government College, and Regional Science Association India are jointly organizing a one-day international webinar on contemporary environmental scenario, a geospatial appraisal. But before proceeding, let me take the privilege to extend our sincere gratitude to the patrons of this webinar.
Rukhsana, just a minute. Rukhsana, sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry, yes? Yes?
Please, participants, kindly mute your microphone. There is echoing effect coming on.
It's a request from organizing committee. Please keep your microphone off. Okay. Sorry. Now, before proceeding, let me take the privilege to extend our sincere gratitude to the patrons of this webinar, Dr. Samar Chattopadhyay, Principal, Barasat Government College, and Professor Chittaranjan Pathak, Chief Patron of Regional Science Association of India, and former Professor, Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur, for their support to organize this webinar. I also express our profound gratefulness to our advisors, Professor Shantanu Ghosh, Secretary, Regional Science Association India, and Professor and Head, Department of Economics, Maulana Azad College, Professor Shumana Bandhopadhyay, President, Regional Science Association India, and Professor, Department of Geography, University of Calcutta, Dr. Probir Bhattacharya, IQAC Coordinator, Barasat Government College, and Dr. Arun Kumar Roy, Teachers Council Secretary, Barasat Government College, for their guidance. Now let me introduce about our college and department very briefly. Barasat Government College is one of the premier institutions of the district North 24 Parganas, West Bengal, and is now affiliated to the West Bengal State University and run by Government of West Bengal. It is NAC accredited with A grade and DST FIST sponsored college. The Department of Geography is one of the esteemed department of this college and has started functioning from the year 1996. And presently, this department caters groups of bright geographers with its equipped infrastructure and is helping students to become ready to participate in nation's development. Presently, this department is acting as a nodal center of distance e-learning and outreach programs conducted by Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, Indian Space Research Organization, Department of Space, Government of India. Now let me brief about the Regional Science Association India, which is jointly organizing this webinar. Regional Science Association India was initiated in the year 1967 under the leadership of Professor Chittaranjan Pathak, and presently it is a prestigious organization that has been nurturing researches in the field of regional and spatial sciences. Now, as I told before, we are celebrating World Environmental Day. Presently, the Earth is facing increasing dangers due to the various complex environmental problems like global warming, drastic climatic change, environmental pollution and degradation, escalations of natural hazards and disasters, shrinking of biodiversity, population explosions, and many more in global dimension. And this has made it essential for us to have a better understanding of this world. We must learn to treat the extremely rich storehouse of the earth on the path of sustainable development. There is an urgent need for wise management and implementation of systematic strategy at various levels. The webinar aims to make a platform to discuss about different current environmental issues. Hope we will surely be enlightened by the valuable lectures on the contemporary environment from our eminent speakers. Now, we are going to start the formal inaugural session of today's international webinar. At first, I am requesting our respected principal, Dr. Samar Chattopadhyay, to deliver his welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ruksana Begum. So I'm very delighted that the Geography Department of Barasat Government College, along with the Regional Science Association India, have managed to organize such a seminar named Contemporary Environmental Scenario in this participating in this webinar, especially to renowned speakers from abroad. Professor Tomaz Ponce Dentinho from University of Azores, Portugal, and Professor Debjani Ghatak from Texas A&M University, USA. So they will enlighten us in this webinar. So I again thank our department and all the colleagues of my department, the Department of Geography, and formally inaugurate this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your warm welcome. Now, I'd like to request Professor Shantanu Ghosh, Secretary, Regional Science Association, India, and Professor Head, Department of Economics, Maulana Azad College, to address the audience. Sir, over to you.
Madam, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Respected Principal, Barasat Government College, respected Professor Tomaz Dentinho, respected Professor Shumana Bandyopadhyay, President, Regional Science Association, and respected speakers and members in the audience, and also I pay my respect to Professor C.R. Pathak, who is the chief patron of our association. So on behalf of the Regional Science Association of India, I welcome all of you to this international webinar, and I express our sincere thanks to the Barasat Government College, the principal of the college, and the Department of Geography, and all others for hosting this webinar. The Regional Science Association is one of the premier research and academic bodies in the country, which has completed already 50 years. Sorry, I also express my gratitude to Professor Manoj Chatterjee, whom I find here present. So it has already completed 50 years under the leadership of Professor C.R. Pathak, Professor Manoj Chatterjee, then late Professor Dr. Ajit Narayan Bose, and some other stalwarts. So it is really a pleasure that we have been able to organize this event today, which is a very special day, the World Environment Day. And I hope that this seminar will be a grand success, and it will be very productive, especially for the young researchers and the students from geography, economics, and other social sciences. I think I should not waste much time on making my presentation. Rather, I should hand over the microphone to the head of the Department of Geography, Madam Ruksana Begum, for further continuation. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, sir, for your informative speech. Now, I would request to Professor Shumana Bandyopadhyay, President, Regional Science Association, India, and Professor of the Department of Geography, University of Calcutta, to address the audience. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon to all of you. It's really a pleasure to be associated with this, to have started off, with the collaboration on this very special day. When the proposal came from Barasat Government College, I was really delighted because we usually have our regular conferences, our programs on, special lectures and other host of programs, workshops for the young scholars that we organize all year round. But this is probably the first time that we are meeting to celebrate World Environment Day. That's very, very special to us. Now, as the head of the department, as also Professor Shantanu Ghosh has already introduced a little about the organization, I would like to be very, very brief. Thank the organizers and thank Professor Dentinho and Professor Ghatak to be here with us. And Professor Dentinho's presentation, the theme of the presentation is going to be very, very interesting for the students and researchers here because it's on UN Sustainability Goals. And I would like to, on this note, I'd like to welcome everybody who is here. I just met our colleagues from Bangladesh virtually, Professor Manas Chatterjee from distant USA. And thank you for being here. And it is so nice to see all of you after a long break. Welcome to all of you, and let us start the program as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, from your warm wishes. Now, I'd request Professor Manas Chatterjee to share from State University of USA to share a few words.
Yes, this is Manas Chatterjee from New York University. And it's a great pleasure for me to attend this event. I know I was part of to establish the Indian section of Regional Science Association, and along with the Chinese section, long time ago. And really, this is a great event. I just want to tell you one thing that we are organizing a meeting, international meeting, on regional science and disaster management COVID-19. In my institute, I established many years ago on Mahatma Gandhi Center for Conflict Prevention and Management on August 5 to 7. And if you're interested to attend, this meeting, and participate, you can write to me, Manas Chatterjee, mchatter@binghamton.edu. And also in this regard, I can tell you that we organize a very major meeting in Geneva on regional science and international management, international migration, and the 2 or 3 volume books are coming out, on this particular subject, the globalization and COVID-19 and international migration on COVID-19. If you're interested about the things, are also for the Mahatma Gandhi Center in Bangalore, you can get in touch with me. My name is Manas Chatterjee. And mchatter@binghamton.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind invitation. We must try to join this program and your valuable speech. Now with this, we are now at the end of our inaugural session, and now we are going to start the technical sessions. In the first session, our honorable speaker is Professor Tomaz Ponce Dentinho. He is from University of Azores, Portugal, and this session will be chaired by Joydeep Dey, Assistant Professor, Department of Geography, Barasat Government College. And in the second session, our honorable speaker is Dr. Debjani Ghatak. She is from Texas A&M University, USA. And this second session will be chaired by Strobona Mojumdar, Assistant Professor, Department of Geography, Barasat Government College. Now I would request Joydeep to continue the program. Over to you, Joydeep.
Thank you, Utsanadi. I would like to introduce Professor Tomaz Ponce Dentinho with you. Professor Dentinho is presently working as a professor in the Department of Economics and Business, University of Azores, Portugal. Professor Dentinho is also serving as the promoter and coordinator of the Master on the Management of Natural Conservation and the PhD Agricultural Economics, Cost-Benefit Analysis. He is presently the editor-in-chief of the journal Regional Science Policy and Practice. At the same time, he is the research program director of South Asia Democratic Forum. At the same time, he is at present the council member of Regional Science Association International and many other professional bodies all over the world. And he has scientific articles published in national and international journals and books several communications at national and international scientific congress, over 200 articles published in newspapers, more than a dozen interviews on radio and television. He has profound experience of conducting more than a dozen conferences and attending them in various countries of the world. With this much brief note about his vast and versatile academic and research experience, now I would like to invite Professor Dentinho to enrich us with his today's presentation on UN Sustainability Goals, Urbanization and Development. Now over to Professor Dentinho.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. It is really a challenge to talk all over the world, to talk around the world on these issues that worries us. And of course, COVID has many problems, mainly in India, but also allow us to explore more these means of conversation between ourselves around the world. Well, I have here some 16 slides that I sent, but eventually I will talk directly and reading through the slides. So my talk is about UN Sustainability Goals, Urbanization and Development. The main idea is like that. You know that the UN likes very much to please everybody. That's the game. And therefore, they put all the objectives there. There are 16, and if you multiply that by the targets, they are even more. And this is expanded to 100 or more targets and aims. The problem is that this is not structures, and so we don't know where to begin. So everyone has some objective there, some goal there that somehow can promote his action, but eventually that's no efficiency and in the use of the scarce resources that we have. So my aim is on one hand to try to structure a little bit the goals of the UN Sustainable Goals based on the virtuous circles of development, and then do an analysis of the world based on that. And on the second part, to ask ourselves, regional scientists, what do you think about these goals? And to know that, to understand if we are somehow biased in our appreciation of the reality. And the conclusion is that somehow we know about the goals, but we are biased. So somehow our goals are, that's the good thing, are very much rooted. So the solutions for these goals in the West are different or in Portugal are different from the solution they're addressing these goals in India or in different parts of India, and which is natural, but somehow it is not in these more global programs that eventually try to put forward all of them without achieving much, or just one of them that's more trendy at the time. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the structuring of the goals, assessing these with the global data, then to look at the regional science perspectives, our own perspectives, and then discuss a little bit the results and present some conclusions. So we have 16 goals. What I did is to expand for the exercise that the method I'm using is adequate for. I expand these 17 goals to 30 goals. For instance, we have the first goal, which is the end of poverty in all its forms everywhere. But the second goal, for instance, end hunger and achieve food security everywhere, but also improve nutrition. And that is my third objective, improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So you see here that the second goal, I expanded into 2. The third goal also to 2, ensure healthy lives for all ages. And I add another objective, promote well-being for all at all ages. And so that's why I moved from the 17 goals of United Nations Sustainable Goals into 30, because the exercise of QMeta requires that. So we have these 30 phrases that we are going to present to ourselves, to regional scientists, and we rank these phrases according to a Likert scheme, and then I analyze the data and reach conclusions. But before that, I want to structure these aims. And the structuring of these aims, it is like that. So I pick up the virtuous circles of development, the old solo thought that somehow capital increases productivity, productivity rises income, income leads to more consumption, then with consumption you get more financing, and then you get more investment, and so you get more capital. And all of these, mainly through income, through consumption, and through capital or environmental capital, you get well-being. So we have this circle that it is in my presentation, and within this circle, I included the goals of the United Nations. So, for instance, in territorial capital, I put the goal number 9, infrastructure, goal number 11, sustainable cities, goal number 13, climate action, 14, protect the oceans, 15, protect ecosystems, and so on, and avoid land degradation and avoid biodiversity loss. For instance, in well-being, it is the last goal. I put the well-being and peaceful societies. And so somehow what I did is to fix the 17 goals around this circle of development that we know from theory. And then try to estimate some causality on it. And in fact, there is on one hand some causality. It's not in this paper, in this presentation, but it is in another presentation, that somehow most of the indicators from the World Bank feeds the GDP per capita, and then the GDP per capita with the social aims feeds the well-being. So we have somehow a double layer connection between all these goals that helps us to understand, on one hand, how capital productivity leads to income and then to well-being, but you also need the social aspects that are important to the global well-being. So that's I saw somehow the presentation there appeared by someone. I'm now in the 5th slide, but if you want to put it, I can follow it, okay? Because I cannot do it. Yeah, that's it. So you see here, we have this slide, the 5th slide, that somehow we have this circle of virtuous circles of development, of sustainable development, and then we put there the different goals. And this is somehow proof robust, not only in terms of the regressions we did connected the different factors, but also the outcomes of our survey to regional scientists. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah. And what I did here was somehow to pick up the World Bank, in the World Bank database, all the indicators that were there are related with sustainable goal indicators. So the World Bank has a data set, a specific data set, where they put all this data. What I did is very simple. So I pick up all this data, I perform principal component analysis on this data for different countries, and then do cluster analysis. And interestingly, I found 4 types of countries, not in terms of the former distinguished clubs defined by the United Nations, but somehow the countries that appear out of the organization out of the analysis around the sustainable goals with the indicators of the World Bank. And it is interesting that somehow, for instance, we have ex-Soviet Union in one country, so they are dependent countries, very sustainable. So, but also includes the Chilean Chile and some parts of Guyana. So each country is very much based on the use of natural resources, with a very centralized organization of the distribution of the income from that. You have the rich countries, which are the North America, the Europe, Australia, Japan, but also Argentina, that behaves in terms of sustainability similar to the rich countries. We have emerging countries like China, the Middle East, and some parts of North of Africa and South of Africa, and the Central America, and you have the poor countries. That includes India and most of sub-Saharan Africa. So this is the outcome of the exercise I did with the Sustainable Development Indicators from the World Bank, and gives an interesting picture that we can somehow analyze, not only analyze, but then use to analyze further on the results of our exercise. Can you pass to the other slide, please? Yeah, okay. And this is so we have 4 development realities. So there's a graph here that somehow you can organize countries according to consumption and according to production. And instead of just having poor countries that have low production and low consumption, and rich countries that have high production and high consumption, you can have, because of the rents of natural resources, you can have countries that have a lot of consumption, but somehow don't have enough productivity that justifies, because they live on oil, on natural resources. And you have also emerging regions that somehow they produce more than they consume, because they save on one hand, and because they don't mind sending part of the value added to more rich countries. And you have rich countries that are the virtuous circles of development. That is a very simple explanation. Of course, there are many exceptions, but anyway, it is a structure I use to organize these. And interestingly, when we go for the indicators that you got and try to put them there in this graph, we notice that, for instance, emerging countries, they have a lot of investment. They have capital, natural capital, and productive capital. They also have productivity, but then most of the money goes elsewhere, or goes to savings to feed again investment, or goes elsewhere. Whereas in underdeveloped regions, we have very good amenities. The nature is still not very spoiled, at least on average. And then this is well-being that comes on. We have dependent regions that somehow they have all the circle, with the exception of productivity, because they got the money from the natural resources. That happens in French Guyana, Suriname, and so on, and also in Chile, but mostly in former Soviet Union. You can pass to the other slide, please. Okay, these are the indicators. So you see the economy, the GDP per capita. I don't see here. I'm going to try here to see what is the second. Yeah, we can stay there. I'm going to try to see what is the explanation there. So you see the first one is the GDP per capita, and then in the economy you go down. You have the manufacturing. You have then the total rents of natural resources. So you see that, for instance, and you have the different types of country for 5 years. So I think 2005, 2010, 2015, and 2000. So that's the different colors, and the different groups of columns are the various type of. Okay. So in the first, the economy, the top left, you see that the GDP per capita in rich countries is much higher than the others. Anyway, the emerging countries are going fast. And when we move to manufacturing, then some kind of productivity, the part of manufacturing, the structure is completely different. So you don't have a lot of manufacturing in the more developed countries. And so you have all these indicators that somehow reveal some consistency of our former maps. Okay, you can go down. So we can say one moment. We can say rich countries show a much higher product per capita, strong currencies, a decreasing industrial sector, and a reduced weight of the income from natural resources. Dependent countries have a much lower product per capita, controlled currencies, a rigid industrial sector, and a high dependence on volatile income from natural resources. Emerging countries have a low product per capita, unstable currencies, volatile industrial sector, and a strong dependence on unpredictable revenues from natural resources. And finally, poor countries have a very low product per capita, increasing unstable currencies, a very low industrial sector, and a persistent dependence on income from natural resources. Although they have, the others have more income from natural resources, but it seems to be more structured the way it is used. So the developing countries or poor countries like in Africa, they are very much dependent on the use, as we know, of natural resources, but somehow they are able to catch what is the value or most of the value that is there. Okay, we go down to another one. Yes, please. Yeah, the second one. So now we move to the regional science perspective. So you see these, we have all these 17 goals extended to 30, and then we ask people, the issue is if somehow these rankings that we are asking to 38 colleagues of ours, if they are somehow they reveal some of the some interesting things on the way we think about these goals. One thing is the objective indicators that reveals these expressions. The other thing is what we know about them, what we think about them. What are our goals in terms of our research? We can assume that our goals in terms of research are sustainable development, but what we are seeing, what we will see is that this is not necessarily the case, and we must be aware that our analysis is somehow biased by the perspective we take and by the country we live. So will different regions aim different rankings on UN goals? Will different scientific backgrounds define different rankings, or economists, or geographers, or environmentalists, or engineers? Will we have that differences? Will different attitudes related to sustainable development will also determine these rankings? And now that's the questions of the more specific research we are doing in these presentation. We are revealing in this presentation. Okay, so we move on to the next slide, please. Okay, this is the exercise. So we have all the phrases. We ask people, 38 of our colleagues, to rank them between -4 and +4. That's not a problem. We should imagine. Well, there are just 38 from the 65 people. But in fact, each one of them compared all the different phrases. So there is, for each one inquiry or questionnaire, there is 30 times 29 divided by 2 comparisons. Well, people compare the different phrases. And therefore, we have actually 38 times 435 data. So usually the criticism of this method is that we just have 38 observation, but that's not real. In fact, we have 38 times 435 ways to compare the different phrases. And then we ask, in a simple way, what is the country, the gender, the age, the academic background, and so on. These are the, then we do, with these rankings, we do the principal components exercise, which is just a click in the software program, as you know. So what does the principal component exercise is? It transforms the 38 rankings of different people into, in this case, 10 but the 10 abstract rankings that somehow reveal. The first one reveals 20% of the explanation. The second one reveals 12% until 70, 80% of the explanation. So we can analyze the attitudes and the opinions of all these people in a more simple way, and that's the exercise, and this extract from there some knowledge, well, of course, limited to the data we collect. Okay, and the theory and the questions we are aiming at. Okay, and another slide, please. Okay, and then I try to use this structuring of the goals with the naming of the components. So we extract these resulting rankings from the principal component analysis, and then we can name it. That's the part of where the exercise is more difficult, because somehow we must have a framework reference, must have an analysis to grasp what's going on. And in fact, that first structuring of the goals helped us very much, because we can then not only relate the goals relate the structure of the ranking of the aims of the goals into this circle, but also with regression analysis with the rankings related with the respondents, somehow get who has determined who is getting this type of answer. So the first component is the main aim is to end anger with infrastructure. So somehow they think they connect the goal of fight against anger and the deployment of infrastructures, and so the aims are that. So these people believe that somehow they can move from providing infrastructures to India or to South Asia and to Africa, Southeast Africa, will reduce anger. Eventually, they are right through the market and through better, not only people that are not connected will be able to sell their products outside, but also they receive also products from outside to feed those in need. So it makes sense, but anyway, there are a lot of assumptions in between that somehow the market with new infrastructure, the infrastructures will reach everywhere, and all the other issues are there. Interestingly, this is more when I relate this ranking, the first component to the objective features of the respondents, the one that is more robust is gender. So women are none of the others were with coefficients were significant. So, but gender, somehow you increase your ranking if the respondent is a woman, which is interesting. Eventually, the women have a more broader perspective on what is needed. Somehow they need things on the market, and people need things in the market, and they need to sell what they produce more. Extra, and that makes sense. So that's first component, not only from gender, but it's also what is common in most of the rankings. So end of anger, but with infrastructure. Let's move to the second one, please. Second component. So it's the same, end of anger, but with and poverty, but with justice, education, and institutions. So the final aim is the same, so which makes sense. It is the first goal of the United Nations Sustainable Goals, but this second group, or this second attitude, somehow thinks a little bit different. They think that somehow through consumption, with education, justice, and institutions, and also through a better distribution of the income, we can reach the issue of anger, or to solve the problem of anger. Of course, this is an extreme point, but it is interesting for us to understand how we feel. And when there is a selection of projects or programs or whatever, what people think. All the goals are good. All the goals are interesting. That's the attitude of the United Nations. But, and some of us have a strategy different than others, but eventually we have this bias towards not necessarily towards the goals, but eventually towards the means to achieve them. And this is, for instance, the second attitude is interesting because older people, a little bit older, somehow benefit this strategy. People that are that choose this, I put three choices. If we are more pro-social and economic, more pro-social and environment, and more pro-environmental and economic. And this is about the economists, the people that are more for efficiency and the environment. They don't like this attitude. So they don't like, and we understand why, they don't think that redistribution of income is an effective tool and neither to build institutions. They think different, or to have these basic needs approach. Our colleagues somehow are more economic and the environment, and also dependent countries. Why is that? Eventually because they already have that. So dependent countries, ex-Soviet Union countries already have these distribution schemes and the supply of basic needs. So they feel, eventually they think that's an hypothesis to explore. They think that this is not the path to go. Okay, one more. Okay, and then the third component is well-being with the environment. So they have eventually more environmentality. It is the younger people that prefer that attitude, and it's still there, but environmentalists are a little bit like that. So if you have a good environment and the investment in a good environment with partnership, and you have a good health and education, you achieve well-being. So they are not very much in favor of the economic part, or either the financing or the economic part of the virtuous circles. You can move on because, component 4. Yeah, one more slide, please. Yeah, end of poverty with energy. This is very much what it is the key word, or what is trending now in the West, is that, okay, we must solve the problem of the world by having clean energy and renewable energies. And this comes out of our colleagues that somehow think that with clean energy, so with investment in new renewable resources, we can reduce poverty and have a better well-being, welfare. And that's the component 4, which is understandable. One more, please. This is better cities with economic growth. These are more efficient. So there are some of our colleagues, older people think like this. And of course, natural scientists, people from ecology and so on, don't like it. More geographers and economists prefer that attitude, that very much in the smart cities and so on. And we've got clean energy and economic growth. We move on. Yeah, one more, please. Then environment and growth, it is the same, but a little bit different. It's mainly on climate, and that somehow can foster growth from this perspective. And of course, our colleagues from China and from emerging countries don't like it, because they think that if they have to obey the climate action, of course, the path of development is more refrain. We move on. 7, yeah, I think, yeah. So what? So I'm finishing now. Somehow we have all this final table where the different components or the different extreme attitudes that we have are explained by some of our colleagues. For instance, in favor is our colleague Neil Reed and Abdelaziz Katabi. That's the difference between women and men. And against are the Rosella and Sagarmita that presented it. So the gender issue is there. But what is interesting is that there is this belief that somehow the infrastructures can address the problem, and we have all these factors But for instance, second, with institutions, the economic people that are for more neoclassic or more pro-growth, and those who are dependent don't think, and these have names, Mark and Andreas Cozy versus Nicolai and Han. So we have the table where we have ourselves. This is interesting then to discuss between ourselves, because somehow our papers, our consultancy, and our advices and our choices are somehow determined by these bios. I thought differently, that somehow in interdisciplinary approach we have common methods, which is fantastic. In fact, we have methods that we can share. We have the same reality, fantastic. And I thought we had the similar aims, but no, we don't have the same aim. We don't rank the goals of sustainable development in the same way. And this is, we can pass to the other slide. Yeah, and so that's the conclusion. So the good news is that somehow we are better than we thought. So we demand what people want in their places. So there is a geographical, there is somehow a place-based policy. So people from different countries, in fact, have also different attitudes. So we have in the West people that are the agenda now, the energy agenda and the climate change agenda is more stronger than in the others. And we have people in China that eventually don't want so much this strategy. So if you enlarge this survey to other people, I think this will reveal not only the what is there, but what people want. That's a very interesting exercise that a master student last year did. It is in the Portuguese journal Urbanisation. And what it revealed that 5 cities in the Azores, we did this exercise, and the result is that people want naturally what they don't have. So if you have a city that has a lot of green areas and it's very nice in terms of environment, they want employment and they want more distribution. If you have a city that has not green areas and that's poor, that's very low employment, what they want is employment. And so the attitudes of people and then peoples as well, and the communities choose what they don't want, which is good. So eventually we have similar aims, but the context where we work and the context where we live are different. So if some people move from another place and live there for some time, eventually the aims will be adjusted. The second, but we need to ask ourselves. So, for instance, our colleagues from Soviet Union and from former Soviet Union don't think that they want to change their institution. Although, objectively, their institutions somehow are a little bit strange when compared with the others. And so, but they think that no, we don't want to change the institution. So this also is, well, it can happen with the others. We don't want to change institutions because we are very rooted in our institutions, but somehow, eventually, sometimes these institutions that somehow have to change. That's why in some countries we have more revolutions than in others, because people are more stubborn with their own institutions. And then, of course, we have people that think that it can, or mostly in the West, so in the journals that we develop, that think that only productivity is interesting, and we have the papers by Piketty and others that somehow reveal that is not false, it's not. And then should we forget about infrastructure? So the first component leads to infrastructure, but we don't understand. So, but we know that this somehow is not on one hand adopted by most of the regions, and on the other hand, we know that in some countries, at least, we have infrastructure did not reach much in terms of development. So, and finally, of course, we need second opinions. When we do a paper, we never ask, we put there sustainable development or smart cities or whatever, some nice game for the paper. But if you want to do papers that are internationally accepted, and that on one hand, and on the other hand, can respond to the problems of different regions, of course, we must correct our bias, our personal bias that we have on the analysis, and eventually try to have a discussion not only on the methods and on the data and on the technicalities, but also on the interpretation of the results, because it's not, I don't want to, because interpretations are biased. So that's the way. And so if we have different, for instance, for our journal, Regional Science Policy and Practice, eventually we will need in the future to have this final discussion where we interpret the data and where discuss the data and put forward recommendations. Eventually this part, it should be more participative, not only to the colleagues, but also scientific colleagues, but eventually within the region that the paper is applied. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much. If you have questions, or I'm available to do that. Okay. To answer them.
Can I start a question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Comments, yes?
Yes, please. Yes.
I think my longtime friend, Tomaz Dentinho, has skillfully discussed the environmental programs of the United Nations, and also very efficiently applied the factor analysis and principal component method to find out some conclusions. But the two things here, which was not considered in the United Nations, program, is a question of peace and conflict between different countries and its linkage to environment. That's something you can find out in the books I mentioned before, and also in an article coming out in an international journal on environmental sustainability. I published, no, not published, it will be published with Bohan Munasinghe, the Nobel laureate in environmental peace and environment. This question of conflict between different players in the economic system is an extremely important thing related to environmental problems. And second thing is this question of demography and epidemiology, healthcare. These are the things that are very important, like COVID-19. So I, as a student and a colleague of Walter Isaac for last many years, late Walter Isaac, we started Regional Science Association many years ago, but we did not at that time anticipate the question of environment and question of demography and epidemiology and healthcare. This type of thing associated with environmental problems. And these are the things we are discussing in our meeting in Bangalore on regional science, peace science, and disaster management to be held there. So this is excellent exposition of Tomaz, excellent as usual. He always starts with, but there's a need of including healthcare, question of conflict between different groups of people, participation of the people, and political decision-making of the organization and the leadership. These are the things which would include more on the environmental situation of the United Nations problem. And this we are doing, but this is just a start. And another thing is that there are many things going on in the area of management science. I'm a professor of management. I used to teach at the Wharton School for many years before coming to New York. You see the question of many things like artificial intelligence, the question of big data, question of data analytics. There are many, many things coming up, in those areas in management science. And it's time for us to include those things in the tools of regional scientists. Indian geographers are famous all over the world. S.P. Chatterjee and so many people in India, excellent geographers. But we had always difficulty to link regional science and geography. We started in 1965 with Dr. Ghatak in IIT in Karakoram. But I must say this, we have been unsuccessful in using the regional science as a subject in Indian and continent, the type of regional science which India needs, not the regional science which we study in New York or in developed countries. We have to have that goal. Indian regional scientists, Indian ideas of regional scientists, developing countries' regional scientists. These are the things, the goal. And I'm sorry to say, for the last 50, 60 years, my regional science, this we did not achieve yet. And Indians like this, and the students and the professor in Barasat University, Department of Geography in Calcutta University, I know the geographers, brilliant. They can do this by including their work with the management scientists of IIM and other places to get this, And this will be, this is being done in Bangalore also in another meeting in a business analytics and disaster management. I just want to have some comments. I know the other people may have comments. I don't want to say many other things. We are doing an excellent job, Tom. I really appreciate your principal component analysis part, because I'm a statistician, one of the few living regional scientists of student and colleague of Walter Isert, and not so many students and colleagues in regional science are living nowadays in this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manager. Let me try to answer, because otherwise I forgot. Well, one, distribution of rents on peace. I think it is very much related with the distribution of the rents of natural resources. Otherwise, the war will not be territorial. And this is something that is in the von Thunen graveyard. He invented a formula somehow how the money from the rent of the natural resources, which was land at that time, how it goes to the city or stays in the farm. And he has a formula, and I think we should look at it, because we don't know yet. Because if it stays just on the farm, for instance, if all the money from the oil stays in the Arab world, then they build Dubai. But I don't know if Dubai is sustainable. But that's an issue, a very strong issue. It's not only of the natural resource, land, but also of oil, the geographical strategic position, and so on. I think this is usually the prices are there, the rent prices are there, but where does this money go? And that's a very important issue. It's a conflict, in our own families, where the capital goes when our fathers die. It is between countries, it is everywhere. That's a real issue, because it's not only, it is the only, because it's something that needs some thought necessary, and von Thunen already asked this question. The second issue is about COVID. I think what COVID revealed is that we cannot lie in terms of science. So we must be sure of what we say, and because our advice, if it is wrong, people die. And I think what reveals that is the geography of, it's of course the geography of poverty, somehow, like people in India or whatever, but also within each country, the lack of knowledge and bad policy. So hospitals are not all the same within Portugal, and we thought they were the same. The different regions in different countries that have different policies, have different results. So I think, and this is not just the error of the politicians, it is the error of the epidemiologists and regional scientists and whatever, that in fact provoked, are blamed, somehow, if they have conscience, somehow they are to blame, or the science is to blame to produce that. Because I think, and that's the role of regional science, to be like a territorial medicine, so that we suffer, or we ask, if there is behind a policy failure, there is not a science failure. And for instance, in Europe, we know that this is the case, at least in terms of cohesion policy. You can talk about big data. Yes, I think big data, but I think the economists and the environmental economists should to put some theoretical thought in the big data issue, because we have this concept of prices and real things, and bid prices and bid rents and so on. And we can put in the analysis this, because what we want to do is to reveal the constraints that are in the system. And so if the market works, we have these prices. If the market don't work, we must have an idea how to reveal the bid rents or the bid prices or the shadow prices of the conflicts that exist there. And I don't see much there. For instance, in these regressions that everybody do now, some of these regressions, some of these coefficients are productive coefficients, and some of them are bid rents, are constraints that are there, and so they must interpret it in a different way. In comparison, it is the opposite. The interpretation is different, and we must put some thought on that. I forgot why there was a last point. I don't remember. Sorry, Professor.
I am talking about this question of epidemiology and linkage and political science, political people, the leaders. These are the very important things. The whole COVID-19 in the developing countries, particularly including India, is a question of leadership. And also this is extremely important, and this is something we should include in regional science, regional development.
Yeah, you're talking about this Indian regional science and West regional science. I think it is the same. I told our professor, our colleague Daniel Chamansky, he asked me in a council meeting, Thomas, why do you want to go there to Africa, there to South America, there to India? And I told her, first, there are interesting problems that we don't know. Second, and eventually more important, there are interesting people and great minds that in fact we can bring together. And he understood. So to connect the Regional Science Association International was crucial, not only to share methods, because we can learn a lot with each other, but to share new phenomena, to understand new phenomena. That's why if we go to Africa, of course, there is new. We in the West, we assume something that does not happen there. The assumptions we take are different, and so the solutions also are different. I think that I don't think that there is an Indian regional science and the Portuguese regional science. Of course, our aims are different, but science is when we open up the assumptions, like Schumpeter did, to include the other realities, and then to have the capacity to have good methods that to encompass all of them. But of course, that's a big challenge. And I think the complementarity between geographers and economists and environmentalists is crucial. But we are reaching there. So the medical doctors reach that point. So somehow they treat us better because they are able to connect the different sciences within medicine. And we are not yet there, but we should go. We should be there if we feel guilty about the mistakes, the scientific mistakes we provided that lead to policy failure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just one moment that I just for your information, many years ago, I wrote a book with Mohan Munasinghi, the Nobel laureate in global warming, called Environment and Health in the Developing Countries. If you have time, you can have a look how we have tried to link environment and global warming and so on to healthcare. So this is extremely important. Healthcare management, and what is the situation in India? The whole area of healthcare management is one of the things which is lacking. The same problem, it's the same thing. So what I'm saying, there's a linkage between Walter Isert, he told me many times that two things he could not do in his life. At the end, almost at the time when he died, number one, he could not have regional science applicable to developing countries. And number two, he could not link the regional science with other things, sociology, anthropology, and demography, and that type of thing. That is two failures. He said he used the word failures he had in his life and his associate in two things: religion, science. Sumona did an excellent job in Goa about regional science in developing countries in the World Conference. And these two, we could not do it because regional science in India, in other countries should be different. I keep on telling you, it's not the same thing. Same thing happening in management science. I'm involved with management science. Same thing in management. They're repeating the same things which are doing in the United States. But management education in India, should be different. And then what you teach? I'm teaching the #1 school in the world, water school. It's having the same thing in India. That's really bad. Indians are very capable people, statisticians, geographers, they're very smart. So they should have their own thinking about how to apply regional science and management science to solve problems of India and the developing countries.
Yes, sure. Well, of course, it's but you can still learn with each other. So,
right.
Okay.
There is a question from audience. Devamita Nondi wants to ask, what are the way to eradicate poverty in developing countries like India?
Well, I don't know. Of course, if I knew, but there are two things. There is poverty in the Azores. There are two, from the analysis I made here some time ago, there are two main problems in poverty. One is that the poor people think they are poor because of the others' fault, not of themselves. So this is the denial problem. So we are like that because it is the fault of the others. And this is in every poor. When we asked whether this was a clear divide between poor people and non-poor people. I asked with this exercise, the two methods, I asked during this 2012 here, there was a major crisis and many people went to this charity, to the charity to collect money. Some of them were poor, some of them were just people that wanted clothes or some food or whatever for this period of when they were unemployed. And then these phrases, one of them asked, well, the poor people are poor because of them. And then I use this phrase for the principal component. The exercise was amazing. All the real poor, in fact, denied this. The second problem is that the others that are not poor, ourselves, we have many solutions. So our solutions are, each one helps the poor in a different way. So we don't know, and eventually it is, well, that's charity, normal charity. But we don't really analyze the thing of poverty. And many times the thing of poverty, of course, is related with too much support, or you don't have access to land, you move to another place and you don't have access to land. But so we are poor because you don't have capital, any type of capital. So when we don't have any type of capital, either land, family, whatever, networking, so you became poor. But of course, that's more theoretical approach. But eventually you should go for the good cases, where in fact, for instance, I read just yesterday a paper that told me in the 60s, the surroundings of Lisbon were full of slums, because people moved to the countryside into Lisbon and from Lisbon to Europe. And the countryside and the surroundings of Paris and so on were also full of poor people, Portuguese, Italians, Spanish. What was the change? I thought it was just a change along the generations that somehow you can improve. That's part of it, of the story. What I learned yesterday is there was a different way of planning. So until the 65, here in Lisbon, everything was controlled. All the urbanization was very much controlled, and public doing, and no private. No, it was not through licensing. It was just, no, I'm going to these quarters and then these quarters and these quarters. So they were not efficient. It was not efficient. And then suddenly they opened to the private sector the development of houses, and then with some licensing, then of course the slums disappeared. So I think we should find property. We should find what are in fact the first restriction that we should, and sometimes this restriction is put by ourselves, that we think it's helping poverty, but it's not. So that's I think we should go, in fact, open the box for different solutions and compare different countries, because in fact some countries were able to reduce and even in India nowadays is able to reduce poverty. So that's what was done there. That in fact the reduction of poverty in India and China is tremendous in the last 20 years. Okay, thank you.
That's a very good point. I think, as you know, my good friend Amartya Sen and also the recent Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee, they have shown that this poverty and the lack of nutrition and the slums, as Tomaz said, it's not the question of lack of food, of lack of opportunities. It's a question of the system of which is the problem. That's the thing they have done. So I know the Amartya Sen and Abhijit Banerjee, these two Nobel laureates in recent years.
Yeah, we invite this, what's her name? The lady from, he's French, but he's living in Canada. Esther Abdul, that also, and he went for the evidence. You look at India, but what is there? And what are the good cases and bad cases? And they selected the fact, which was vaccination and schooling, that good schooling, sometimes schooling is very bad, and good schooling, that was the difference. And this is also a very interesting analysis that we can do in regional sciences, that we are open to what is the reality and then try to see what are in fact the factors, the evidences that show us that instead of having something that is already in our mind and then we put forward. The problem of regional science and somehow agriculture economics and a little bit environmental economics is that we are, those who pay us is the public sector. And so we are not scientists, we are the promoters of policies, agriculture policy, environmental policy, and regional policy. And this is a different game. So we don't think, we think about what is the best way to spend money for the governments. And this is not, I see this in agriculture economics, I see this also in environmental economics, and I see this also in regional economics. So if you, in our universities, you are not able enough to free ourselves from the policy issue, just the central government policy issue or European policies, then we are lost, because there is a lot of money from these bodies, and we, of course, our life does not last forever, and we are biased towards this with goodwill, with trying to see the nice thing, but in fact we are too speedy or too biased to promote this policy. So if we move from policy making to analyze the issues, and eventually we can begin by just correcting policies. Well, sorry, what we have done is wrong in terms of cohesion policy. We should think differently. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are two questions more from Bhavna. She wants to know what will be the effect of this period on the economy. That is this pandemic period, the effect of pandemic period on the economy. And the second one is, will the developing countries drive towards maturity due to the change in the death rate? Will the developing countries drive towards maturity due to the change in the death rate?
Well, I don't know, but but there is some readings and some in the economy and to our colleagues. That's a debate that's going on. What I think I learned some time ago in a regional science conference, something very, very interesting was that it is in the time of change that minor changes, minor policy changes, in fact creates a difference in terms of the future path. So the good thing is that somehow depends on us what is the future. And I think that, for instance, that we use these frameworks now. There is a potential to have a big major changes in universities and in conferences and in teleworking and so on. Well, part of the world is living like this. So unless we change the institutions that somehow allow this, for instance, if now we return, now in terms of congresses, last year I organized here a congress that somehow it was at the same time face-to-face and broadcast and at a distance. That was perfect. So the way we build conferences, the way we build universities and so on, that's a completely, but eventually we should return to university because it is important for the multiplier of the economy, and we invent that face-to-face contacts is essential. Okay, we know that is important to gain trust and to gain, interaction, but eventually it can work, we can be, have a difference. So it depends. What I say is that the challenge, we can do the difference. And some of the countries are doing that difference, are already in front, and are using it, and they are shaping it. There is I heard also a few days ago, that's the good thing of this system, that our friends from the United States and from Central Europe, Peter and I is very much aware of, because they like big cities. And what's going on, because that is somehow the future, what's going on in the real estate business. And somehow the houses in the center and the buildings in the center are decreasing. And that can also determine the future. Because what is going to happen in these cities. Now I am in the Azores, now I am in Lisbon at this moment. But anyway, the movement around I think regional scientists should have a say. In terms of poverty, I think there's no good news, because people will be that are not in touch with this type of facilities. Of course, they will be even more detached, but also at the same time, young people will catch up easily. So I think that can happen, as happened with mobile phones. Well, when we begin to think about what is the impact of digital world, and most of the people said, no, mobile phones only in the more rich countries. I told them it's completely opposite, because in poor countries they don't have normal phones, so mobile phones will have a jump, and that happened. That transformed completely the way people communicate in the developing world, although still the prices and the costs are not adjusted to these countries. Okay, thank you. I don't have the answers. We can have a discussion on that.
Yeah, really, it's difficult to answer that. I just wanted to intervene once for a short while, just to mention to all of you that the lecture the talk that Professor Dentinho delivered today is coming out in the form of a publication in the Indian Journal of Regional Science in the upcoming issue. So it is, I think, both the volumes are slightly delayed because of the pandemic and the closure of the press and other things. So I just wanted to inform you that you will get this material very soon in the journal. So just to mention that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir. Since there is no more question, I would like to thank Professor Dentinho for such kind of elucidating presentation and enlightening us with different aspects of UN sustainability goals and how they are interlinked with the aspects of development and urbanization. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Our next session will be chaired by Shrobana Mojumdar. I now want to hand over this session to Shrobana.
Thank you, Joydeep, and a very good evening to all. It's my great privilege to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Debjani Ghatak. She did her PhD in Earth and Environmental Science from City University of New York. After that, she has worked as a researcher as well as faculty in various reputed institutions in India and abroad. Currently, she is a visiting assistant professor in Department of Geography, Texas A&M University. In such a young age, she has carved her niche as a physical geographer with a specialization in climatology. She has an extensive number of publications in various important topics like Arctic climate change, mountain climate change impacts in South Asia, etc. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Debjani Ghatak, who will give her talk on examining the heat waves of India, past, present, and future. Before starting the session, I would like to request all the participants, please put your comments and thoughts in the chat box. At the end of the session, the speaker will attend the questions. Now, please join me to welcome once again Dr. Debjani Ghatak. Over to you, Dr. Ghatak. Thank you.
Thank you, Tribhuwana. I'm just trying to share my presentation. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to see if. I'm trying to go to the slideshow mode in the Google Meet. So I think I have to, let me try this way. Okay, can you all see the slideshow mode?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much. I was a little nervous, honestly, that it's a morning time here at right now. It's actually 7:22, but I woke up a little early. So I was a little nervous that hopefully I can wake up. Anyway, first of all, jokes apart, and thank you very much for inviting me. Last year, I presented at the Bidhannagar College and I discussed the same topic over there. My research interest actually includes Arctic climate change because, as you all know, that there is a huge climate change going on, like at different fronts. I mean, some of the areas of our Earth experiences more changes than other parts, and one of that is like very high mountain region. And I think this is very important because for Indian perspective, the Himalaya, we are losing snow, we are losing glacier. So this is something that I have been working on all those different issues. So that's why I have like a lot of research interest, and today I thought to talk about the one which I did this work focused only on India, which will be more relevant for today's topic. So that's why I chose the heat wave, and this is something that in this changing climate, and I would like to also kind of connect my talk with a previous presenter. And first of all, it has been like a great presentation by Tomaz, and I have learned actually a lot from his talk and the discussion with Dr. Chatterjee. It has been a great talk. So the in this sustainable art concept, right? One thing I think which is important, also the climate change issue, because when we're talking about sustainable, right? The sustainable in terms of the sustainable art, the sustainable environment, the thing that we are facing right now is lot of issues associated with climate change. And I would give you one example here, that is the climate refugee. I'm sure you have heard this word, because a lot of areas in the world who actually experience, the devastation. It could be storm, it could be sea level rise, and all these are creating people in more like damaging condition. For example, they're losing their housing, they're losing their kind of the local economy, they are like the agriculture. So as a result of climate change, we are facing a lot of the issues that we did not see before. So I think that's why my talk is very much connected to the previous presenter as well. But I will focus today only on the heat wave, because we all know India, we are like geographical location wise, we are in this tropical and little bit of subtropical region, and as a result we face this very high temperature during the summer months. And sometimes that temperature goes extremes, like in the statistics you have your average, you have your standard deviations, but sometimes those numbers really spike. And as a result, we see days, a couple of days, and continuous heat wave, and in many parts of India. So today I'll kind of focus on that in next few minutes. And I just like to take a step back here. Just as a person myself, I am a climate scientist. I love to teach, and that's what I have been doing for many years. And I also do research, of course. And I love to watch cloud. I try to like to identify different types of clouds. That's kind of my hobby. And I'm really grateful to my family, my teachers, the time that I spent in Kolkata at Presidency College, University of Calcutta, and my schools. And I'm very grateful. And of course, I always like to be connected with my friends. So let's now jump into my, kind of the content of my talk. So I would like to start with, a couple of those news clipping that came up during 2015 when we saw this, cracking the agricultural field, which is cracked because of the less, very dry heat, lack of water. We have seen this impact in the urban areas because, urban areas are particularly, urban areas has their own problem of urban heat island effect. And on top of that, this heat wave devastated those regions. My picture is not great in the slide, but you can see, the roads are kind of damaged because of this severe heat. So what is basically the kind of the baseline? When you talk about this heat wave, we talk about this extreme heat, means couple of days with very high temperature. If we dig into the literature...
Excuse me, Dr. Ghatak.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we cannot see the chain slide.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Is it okay maybe that instead of using the slideshow mode, I keep this way? Is that okay? If that works?
I think it's okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry, you will not see my all those animations, but that doesn't matter. So the baseline was, in general, in North India, if you just focus on North and Central India, then we know that our climatological average temperature for the month of May is 35 degrees Celsius, which is in general a very high temperature. But some years, if we, when I did this study, I focused in the year of 2015. So whatever I'm going to show you today will be from the year 2015. But 2015 and 2016 actually also experienced another heat wave. But before that, prior to 2015, if you looked at the literature, you will see the couple of years really stood out. And those are like 1998, 2003, 2005. Now, all those years, the temperature was above that average. That means, that they go beyond, like go above the 35 degrees Celsius. So when we dig out the reasons or the causes of this heat wave, couple of things always were mentioned in the scientific literatures. One is, we know that monsoon is very important for Indian climate. So the lack of rain in the pre-monsoon time, also the delayed monsoon, that triggered this heat wave. Also, there is actually some connection between not just the Indian condition in the atmosphere, but also in a large-scale atmospheric condition. What does it mean? That means that sometimes when something goes on I'm not going to go into too much detail about the atmospheric science, but let's say if there are some changes in the pressure pattern happen even over Europe or over Atlantic, that can actually also cause changes in our Indian atmospheric condition. So that means heat wave can be caused for multiple different reasons, in summary. Now, when I started this work, I was very curious to examine only the condition at the year 2015, that what is really happening, this year that triggered this heat wave. So with that, just a little bit of more context, not just India, but from Europe and Russia, there are some unusually, like very extreme heat wave event happened in the year 2003, 2010. So we are not alone in this game that, the Indians, we always have this heat wave problem. I mean, that's not the case. Now, just as a summary, like I have explained so far, that what are those causes of the heat wave. So the one that I mentioned, late monsoon rain, means the monsoon can be delayed. There is inadequate pre-monsoon rain, and also some rain, low rain in our neighborhood region. For example, Pakistan or Afghanistan, that area, if we see that there is lack of rain there, that actually causes advection of dry heat into India, and it can trigger high temperature over India. So as I was saying, you see that our atmospheric condition is not just important, it is also important to understand what's going on in our neighboring state or at the more large scale circulation pattern. The last one, I would like to also mention that you probably heard about atmospheric sea surface temperature connection, the teleconnection pattern called El Nino. Now, El Nino also, it is also found that El Nino is connected to some of the heat wave events that happened in the past. So let's now move to more from the past to the present, and I will also touch base a little bit with the future. So in now from this slide onwards, I will talk about only 2015, not any past anymore. And I will start with this map to kind of give you a flavor that what are those regions or the cities which affected in this 2015 heat wave. And in my map, you can see, Delhi, Allahabad, Jharsuguda, Hyderabad, and Khammam. These are the ones that, like in the news, it came up that they experienced very high temperature, as high as 46 degrees Celsius or 48 degrees Celsius on the ballpark. Now, of course, when this kind of event happen, I mean, why do we care? I mean, we do care because it is associated with the tremendous death toll. So it takes life, and it actually is detrimental to our economy because of this heat wave. The agriculture is affected. So there are a lot of things that is affected, and as a result, we care about this. So if you look at my number, you don't have to really go too much detail about all this number in my list. But if you just scroll down this list, you will see the number of deaths is very high in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana. So, and look at my third column. Unfortunately, I can't show you my pointer right now in the slideshow. But if you look at the third column, the dates are June and May. So one thing when I started this work, I was wondering that, when this is really happening, because in the news, it's very hard to see. It's scattered all over. Like they're talking about some days in May, they're talking about some days in June. If you don't really identify a time when it really happened, you cannot really explain what is the atmospheric condition that triggered the event over there. So that was something that was my kind of first research questions that kind of like came to my mind. Now, this work has been already published in one of those Nature publication house journal in scientific reports. So if you're interested, you can take a look at in more detail because just in the interest of time, I cannot go over all the results. Okay, so couple of research questions that I would like to answer today. One is, in 2015, what is the spatial signature of the heat wave? Where really was it focused? When did it strike? So we are gonna, as a geographer, we always care about space, we care about time. So I'm going to investigate that. And the last one is, I wanted to check what's the role of local feedback in triggering the heat wave? And this third question is a little tricky, and I will explain that in a minute in detail. So when we do this kind of work, we first identify what are the variables that I need to investigate any such scientific question, right? Now, in the atmospheric conditions, when we are looking at heat wave, the first thing, of course, the surface air temperature in the atmosphere. Now, the second one is net shortwave radiation, means the solar radiation. What is the kind of the condition of the net shortwave radiation? Third one is soil moisture, because if I need to examine what's a local condition trigger the heat wave, that means I need to check the surface condition. Surface condition means not just earth surface, means we have this whole layer of soil and the moisture inside that soil layer, how it plays a role in the interaction with surface and atmosphere. And the last one is sensible heat flux. Now, this variable, I know you guys may be a little tricky because if you're not really from atmospheric science area, so I explained it here. So sensible heat flux means, in very simple words, that how much of the energy exchanged by the surface through the process of this heat transfer from the surface to atmosphere, and it generally happens through conduction. So the sensible heat flux, this variable is important when you want to see how the surface has any role in modulating your atmospheric condition. And when you have like a long, dry summer months, a lot of times what happens is that if you don't get pre-monsoon rain, your soil is very dry because your soil doesn't have any soil moisture in it. And you can really see it in your naked eye, right? Now, when your soil is very dry, that means it absorbs a lot of shortwave radiation, a lot of solar radiation in the summer months. And then that heat then goes from the surface to the atmosphere. So there is this exchange of energy happens from surface to atmosphere, and that triggers our air temperature. So if you understand this part of the logic, it will be very easy to follow the next result section. Now, in research, not just the variable, we do care about our data. And I know there are a lot of students here, so I would like to spend some time talking about some of these data sets that I have used. The first one is the NASA Mera data. This is a reanalysis product. That means they, I had access to NASA Mera that time, but there are a lot of this reanalysis data that you can use for your research, and that basically takes satellite observations, station observation. They put that all in a data assimilation model, and they generate a gridded data set for the whole world mostly. Now, sometimes we cannot rely this data, honestly, because there are a lot of issues with a lot of variables. So you need to make sure that your data is really good for the variables that you're looking at. So variables means that I explained in my previous slide. Now, the next thing I used is station observation to check how good is this data. The third one is called land information system. So when we do research, a lot of times researchers face a big problem, and particularly for India, trust me, I am doing a research right now looking at land use, land cover change, and how it has any effect on our disease outbreak like COVID. And the big problem I am facing right now is lack of data. There is no reliable station observation, and it's so hard to get data for anything. So for this, the thing that helped me in this process is land information system. And what is that? Land information system is a data assimilation framework put together by NASA, where, and I'll actually go to my next slide, which has a nice schematic. I don't know if you can see this very clearly, but basically you have some inputs into the model, and your inputs are meteorological observations. You have some parameters like a topography, soil properties, land use, land cover, those things, and then you use the model to generate the surface fluxes. Like, for example, if you want to know what is your sensible heat fluxes, latent heat fluxes, those things, those data you can't really get very easily. So this platform does give us those variables. So I have used their data to look at particularly the sensible heat flux. Okay, so some results. I don't want to take much time, but I'm just going to go over very few results, which kind of gives us the main storyline here. So this picture, this figure, first of all, what we're looking at here. We are looking at each grid, we're looking at surface air temperature anomaly. And that anomaly is calculated based on the average of 1980 to 2015. That means, from the calculation point of view, you can calculate your average surface air temperature over whole India, means at each grid point of the India, and you can get that baseline as your average value, right? And then you want to see that in 2015, how temperature is anomalously high or low from that average line. So what you see here in this slide, anything which is red or orange in color, that means those regions had positive surface air temperature anomaly, means temperature was higher than average. And anything is blue in color or kind of purplish, those regions which are below the average line, that means which are negative anomaly in surface air temperature. Now, I would like to focus you. I can't. I'm going to try one more time with the slideshow in case it works. Oops. because without pointer, it's really hard to show the. Okay, do you all see my 4 map in the slideshow mode? Sorry, 6 maps.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So if you can see my pointer, now this is the region which kind of really stood out. Okay, and this is the time period of May 21st, 22nd to May 28th. Now, this is actually, and that is a problem between our research and the news, because in the news, they say a lot of things, and when you really look at the data and you do the analysis, you see that there is some discrepancy. So what really came out of this analysis is that during the last week of May, we see a really major kind of a hotspot in our eastern side, and which kind of expands to little bit central and southern section of India. So that's kind of the hotspot of the heat wave. But if you now I'm moving my pointer to the first week of June, and you see that there is a North India which is also showing a hotspot. Now, the question is, when and I changed my slide, hope you have seen that. Now I am actually showing you some time series from a couple of those places from that hotspot. Now 2 things came out that I'm just focusing on, not those 6 time series, but just 1 time series from Daltonganj, just to kind of show you what's going on in many of these places, that there are 2 consecutive events happen. So this heat wave that first occurred in the end of the May, it subsided, and then it came back in the month of June again. And that peak is very prominent over, and I checked this data at many places. I'm just showing you one here very clearly, but it actually stood out. So that means this is the data from Mera that I have used, NASA Mera data, which shows us a surface air temperature. But I didn't want to believe any, model generated data, right? So I actually looked at some station observations and compared. And that's why in the time series, you see 2 lines. One is a solid line, one is a dashed line. And that means the station observation it does really closely match with the NASA data. So we can trust the data. So what is really going on, I will tell you through this 4 figure. I know it's a lot of information. So when this second peak happened, I'm not going to show you when the first peak happened because it's too much information for this talk. So for the second peak, what happened is that it actually concentrated the hotspot over the North India. And I am showing you 4 maps. The one which is top left, which is precipitation, top right, which is net shortwave radiation, bottom left, total profile soil moisture, bottom right, sensible heat flux. Now, if you kind of correlate them, and again, I have done a lot of other analysis just to kind of understand whether this is happening or not. So what we see here, that the rainfall is anomalously low. And if you look at this color code, you will see that.
Sorry, Dr. Ghatak, I think the slide, we cannot see the current slide.
Again? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I just get out of the slideshow mode. Can you see 4 maps?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, thank you. So what is really happening from understanding this event during the month of June is this. In summary, we are having lack of rain over this region, and we are having anomalously high net shortwave radiation. So that means the surface absorbed those solar radiation, and it triggered this very high sensible heat flux. So if you compare my 4 plots here, this is very clear. Another thing which happened is, because this is a second event, there are two consecutive heatwave events happened during this time. As this is a second event, during the first event, the land has been already very dry and there was no rain for several weeks. And there is this excess high, anomalously high net short of radiation. So land was super dry. So if you look at now the soil moisture profile, you will see it's negative anomaly. That means it's a very dry soil. Now, when the soil is very dry, we can expect that the sensible heat flux anomaly will be high as well, and it's very intuitive. So this is what's happening, and as a result, the second heat wave actually generated because of the first heat wave kind of made that background for the second one, and as a result, the second one kicked in, and it actually triggered extremely high temperature and made more damages, basically. Okay, so I am going to the next slide to show you some time series, the period that I'm talking about. This is the particularly in the month of June, and I put this gray color just to kind of show you where to focus on. And one thing I would like you to only focus that green line. I mean, the green line is actually showing the total profile soil moisture. And that is, all the numbers are like negative. That means it's negative anomaly in the soil moisture profile. So sometimes we don't understand how, my whole point of showing this particular result section is this, that sometimes we don't understand that how important our land surface is, even modulating our climate. We talk, a lot of times we focus on all this big connection with the big teleconnection pattern, or what's going on in maybe a lack of rain over Pakistan, that's advection of the heat. But when we have to identify some causal mechanism of an event, we have to look at on all different perspectives. And here I just wanted to point out that the way we treat our land, it's very important even to modulate our climate, and sometimes it can actually cause a damaging event like this heat wave, because here the land played a big role in triggering that extremely high temperature. Now, I would like to now go to the very last part of my talk, and actually my last main slide, which is about the future of the heat wave. And we all kind of have heard this from news that, under this climate change scenarios, we can expect lot of these deviations from the normal. For example, in the United States, we have this tropical storm that hits Florida and Texas, and those storms are becoming more intense, they're becoming more frequent, and they damage this, they wipe out basically towns. And how that kind of event is, how we can look at this in a more futuristic time scale. So the report put together by IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, that gives us the picture of our near future. And they have, and this is actually very important right now, because, the talk that Tomaz gave us, this is the United Nations, kind of the perspective. Now, this IPCC report has all those social component, economic component, because we don't know how our future looks like from an economic point of view, how our developing countries are moving. So there is a lot of those assumptions that is there to make those predictions. So that's why there are a couple of pathways. There is no one single answer for this. There is a prediction of how much, what would be the more frequency of our tropical storm, or what would be the timeline when Arctic will be sea ice free, what would be kind of the prediction that how much sea level will rise under the climate change. So all these predictions have this range the uncertainty range, because the model is generated because, based on a lot of assumptions. So with that, I would like to kind of end with what's the future of our heat wave looks like. And as Indians, we care about this because this is really kind of an unbearable situation for us during summer. So we want to know that, whether the heat waves will be more frequent or not, or more intense or not. So for that, I would like to point to this resource. It's not my research, but this is coming out from it's a really good paper from Murari et al. 2015. If you can actually download this paper. This paper shows that using those CME5 model, which went to the IPCC report, that projections, they're showing that heat waves will be much more intense. They will stay much longer, so the duration will be longer than usual, and they will come at a higher frequency than before. So, of course, I don't have good news for you. This is, not a good future that we are looking at, but this is what it is. And you will see some uncertainty level discussed in this paper. But that's with that, I would end my talk, and I would like to thank Dr. Benjamin Zaitchik, with whom I did this work when I was at Johns Hopkins University. And I would like to thank everybody for being here. And I would like to take any questions you may have for me.
Thank you, Dr. Ghatak, for such a lucid presentation. I'm sure the participants have thoroughly enjoyed it. Now we will go ahead with our Q&A session. I think we have some questions.
I see Dr. Chatterjee raised his hand.
I just want to make a comment. Just to make a comment, this is an excellent presentation. The technical aspect of global warming. This is not the subject matter of this particular session. But one thing, you see, just for your information, we have an association worldwide called SPES, that is spirituality in an environment. This is extremely important for the Scandinavian countries. Also, how spirituality is related. It's a big thing now in Europe particularly, and we are working for the last 10 years. And if you want to see more about this, you can get in touch with me, or you can write in the Google SPES, spirituality. We had a meeting like this in SP Join School of Management in Mumbai recently. And also this is very related to the gross national, happiness, which, as you know, G and H. I was one of the people, invited group of people by the King of Bhutan about this G and H, where there's a component of that is spirituality, not religion, spirituality, nature, natural things, animals and trees, and that type of thing linked with the talk with Dr. Ghatak is saying this. And you may be interested to see how we are doing this related to things, Kumbh Mela or Amarnath and like that. And that's very important subject for geography about the linking spirituality and environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one question from Bhavna. What is its effect on glaciers and water bodies? I think what is the effect of heat waves on glaciers and water bodies?
Yeah, so Bhavna, it's a great question. Thank you. So of course this is extremely connected because we have this interaction between atmosphere and hydrosphere, right? All those if you look at this Earth system, all our main spheres, they are connected. So something if goes on in the atmosphere, the other aspects are not untouched, right? So heat wave, for example, means heat wave creates a lot of water stress. That means, most of the time is lack of soil moisture, lack of rain. So water stress means any kind of water resources will be stressed. For example, it will be more extraction of water, extraction of water from the river or from any other local sources like ponds and lakes. So definitely, and glacier is in general may not be spatially correlated with the hotspot of the heat wave. For example, where the heat wave is really happening, glaciers is way up north in the Himalayas, but that does not mean that glacier is not affected, because in general our air temperature is rising because of the global warming, and as a result we are having we see retreat of glacier. Another thing I would like to point out, that some parts of the world, and these are very uncommon, that Karakoram region, if you're familiar with our geography, so Karakoram is a place where actually we see something different is going on. Though our temperature is changing, rising, they are actually having more snow some years, and as a result that area is not so much affected as the rest of the Himalayas. This is more like I'm talking about the Kashmir, kind of like Kashmir and North region. So definitely heat wave has an impact on the water resources. Is there any other question? Yeah, I see Thomas raised hand.
Hello.
Yeah, Thomas raised hand. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder what would be the scenario if something changed. For instance, during COVID, there is a very during COVID period, there was the pollution was much lower. So eventually you can check what will be extrapolate what will be the effect on global warming, on the pollution, due to if we somehow use the scenario of the COVID scenario. Because India is a very big country, so although it is most of the other countries that are responsible for global warming are in the West, eventually the problem will become much worse, and that's the argument, if India then rightly picked up in terms of development. So what is I think your exercise could be very interesting on one hand, to know what will be the effect if a scenario like COVID in terms of economy is established, and on the other hand, to know what are the implications for what is the implications for India of India behaving better. So if there are local factors that influence the impacts of global warming in your own country, and not only that thing that coming from the global change in the climate. So if you have a role on that, so that's the question that mark, because all of us are, the global warming is a problem of tragedy of the common. So we are all polluting the atmosphere, and then nobody is responsible for anything. But somehow, on one hand, you can have local factors. That's eventually what I saw in your presentation. And on the other hand, India is a big country. It's a very big country. So, and that's I think what could be interesting to highlight what are human factors that can change, human policies that can change, in fact, these tragic outcomes. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would like to comment on the first, the 2 points that Thomas raised. So the first one is, I have not done any research, but I have seen some, articles on that. So for example, during the pandemic time, a lot of the industries were shut down. We had a huge cut in the global emission from automobiles. So for example, people used to go to work by car, and in the developed countries, we know that it's a very car-based society as opposed to the public transportation-based society, which is more, Europe is very public transport, is very much more widely used than America. So in USA, in China, the reduction in the global emission is much less, but how that actually long term, how that has any impact on our global warming, I think it's up to the analysis, because as the economy is opening up, people who will try to recover from the economic loss that they have seen in the last year, and particularly USA and China. And if you really look at all those, Amazon particularly, I don't know if you are all familiar with what Amazon does, right? It's a global company who sends you stuff, and it's a very car-based actually economy. So they send you all the merchandise that you are buying online, and a lot of the cars, they are actually taking you to your home. So that does not cut any global emission, that is increasing the emission. And also, in the pandemic, you will be amazed to see another thing, that China did not stop their production. I mean, there was some crisis. Of course, there is some crisis in the supply chain has been broken, because the supply chain means products going from Africa to China to build the stuff, and then that stuff is distributed globally. So it's a whole supply chain. So of course that chain is broken, but the factories did not stop in China. So how much really this 1 year helped in our global warming situation, I think that's an interesting question. The second one, I think the Thomas raised the point that the policy at a more local scale, and how that has an impact in our climate. And that is something actually I'm doing right now, one of my study in deforestation, how the deforestation has an impact on the public health, means the disease outbreak. And a lot of times they are so much connected with the policy making, because an industry makes a decision with the help of the government that they will open a factory and they will cut a whole forest in South India. And we know that our South India is a tropical biodiversity hotspot. So they wipe out a forest, and they make a plantation, or they make a they basically think that they're actually not destroying the forest, but they are, because once you cut the forest, it's irreplaceable. And as a result, that is, policy goes hand in hand with the climate change, because when you are making that change at a local level, you are altering your climate, you're altering how that has an impact on your public health, because there will be more disease outbreak in the local community. So these are all kind of like a feedback, and thank you, Thomas, for pointing out that.
We have our next question by Boishakhi Dotto. She asked that among all the variables, which one is your independent variable?
So, these are all my independent variables, because I did not really predict anything through the model. But if we go dig a little bit deeper into how my data was coming from, then I would say the independent variable is definitely temperature, and soil moisture and latent heat flux. Those are the outcome of the NASA model, so they are dependent.
The next question is from Debomita Nondi. She asked that what is the range of effect in the agricultural production, mainly vegetables, of climate change?
Yes, so of course, because of the climate change, we see that effect on many fronts. For example, the variability in the monsoon rain, and that is something that is a very unknown right now area, that how the monsoon will be affected in India. And our agriculture depends a lot on monsoon, so that rainfall, like rising temperature, first of all, is detrimental to any agriculture, particularly a country like India. So that is an area that is more, scientists have more understanding, but the scientists don't have much understanding, or they're still scrambling into the facts that how the rain will behave in the near future. And that is something our agriculture depends a lot on.
Now the next question is from Shanup. He wants to know how climate refugees are linked with heat waves.
Yeah, so mainly the climate refugees are mostly affected, I think, by the big like floods and storms. Heat wave, I don't think, as if you look at the more magnitude or the scale point of view, then it is definitely a lower ranking than flood and a storm. Like, for example, Amphan wiped out a lot of villages in Sundarban. So that is the one that creates climate refugees. Or in Bangladesh, we know that the rising sea level in the coastal areas of Bangladesh, that where the people cannot survive in their economy, so they are actually leaving their villages or the towns to go somewhere else to have a life. So that's how you create a chain of climate refugee or migration, and that is more affected by the major events like a tropical storm or a big flood associated with it.
Okay. Gagan Kumar asked that how can we analyze the heat waves in Jammu Kashmir region, and what are the reliable sources of data?
First of all, heat waves mostly happen in North India, West India, Central, South. The Jammu Kashmir must be affected, and definitely it's not very well examined. So the data means all this reanalysis product that I have mentioned in my slide, you can use any of one of that. So NASA Mera data, or there is ERA interim data, and if there are any station observations, you can use that.
Okay, next question is from Anjali Banerjee. She wants to know, how does the heat wave affect the marine ecology?
I'm sorry, which ecology?
Marine ecology.
Okay. Yeah, this is something I really don't know, because the work that I have done, or mostly scientists have done, this is more on a surface air temperature, means what's going on at the land surface. So I think you're talking about marine ecology, means something which goes on in the ocean, right? So that is an area under oceanography where they study how the ocean temperature is changing. Now, I just want to point out one thing here, that warming over land is different than warming in the ocean. Ocean, as a property of the water, physical properties of the water, it takes a little bit longer time to warm up. So that's why it is not very, like right now, if you look at land versus ocean, you'll see all the hot spots sometimes over the land sometimes, but ocean is also changing, and that is something very important. And for example, Arctic sea ice melt is one of that area that we are concerned. So how warming in the ocean water has an impact on marine organism, I think that's something like, we need to really dig out the scientific literature, just means some journal articles for that.
Next, Urpita Trivedi wants to know, would only afforestation be helpful for controlling the air temperature?
No, it will not, because when we cut the forest, it's a irreplaceable damage. Means even if you do some plantation, if you and there is a paper about it. It's not my own opinion. It's a paper about it that people studied how, if you, of course you can control some damage. Of course it's not just a no, but I think it is not same as 100% recovery. When you cut a forest and then you replace the forest, you cannot get the 100% back, because we lose our biodiversity, we lose the all the organisms that live in that ecosystem, and to get it back is a long process, so that takes time. So my answer is yes, it will happen, but it just takes time and it needs a lot of effort so that we can maximize our recovery of those losing all those forests.
Okay, there is no more question for Dr. Ghatak. There was one question for Dr. Dentinho. He has already written the answer. Sir, would you like to explain that again, or Dr. Dentinho, sir?
Maybe he's.
I think he has left. Now I would like to request all the attendees. I have two requests on behalf of the organizing committee. Firstly, please fill up the feedback form. We have just shared it in the chat box, both in YouTube and in Google Meet. And secondly, I would like to request all the speakers and the participants, if you please switch on your cameras for a few minutes so that we can take a photograph of this webinar.
I think Dr. Chatterjee, you were visible until this point, but I think your camera is turned off.
You want?
Yeah, now we can see you. Yes.
Joydeep, it is done, or?
Yeah, it is done now. You will proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again to all our speakers. I would like to invite our professor, Dr. Chandan Surabhi Das, to extend the vote of thanks and our gratitude. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shobana. Am I audible? Hello,
yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, all we have enjoyed a lot. Lots from this particular seminar. So this is a very formal part. Hello. This is a very formal part of the session, that is the vote of thanks. And it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the Department of Geography, Barasat Government College, and the entire team working for the seminar, take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this seminar. I would like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Tomaz, Dentinho, Professor, Center of Applied Economic Studies of the Atlantic, Department of Economics and Business, University of Azores, Portugal, for inspiring us, for gracing your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions, especially on UN sustainable goal with the issue of development. Actually, in connection with the present day, unlimited growth of development, which is now a threat of global civilization, as well as a species extinction. So the issue of concept of peace and confront and of different layer healthcare management and issue of COVID-19. So is very crucial. We are very much enlightened by your excellent observation and opinion. Again, thanks, Professor Dentinho, for illuminating us. Now, our second speaker was Dr. Debjani Ghatak, a climate scientist and visiting assistant professor in the Department of Geography, Texas A&M University. We enjoyed her interesting talk examining the heat wave of India, past, present, and future, where he mentioned the changing scenario of the heat waves, especially in connection with the erratic character of monsoon, present-day global warming situation, climate change situation, and particularly very much interesting climate refugee issue, as well as cyclonic phenomena based on the sea surface temperature. So the way he explained the topic is exemplary. Her research is also on new dimension on the changing climate. Thank you, Dr. Ghatak, for illuminating us with your excellent delivery. Now, I also wish to express my gratitude to our principal, sir, Dr. Samar Chattopadhyay, for his enthusiastic support and encouragement from the beginning. In fact, from the joining in this college. His dynamism inspired us a lot for such academic activities, both online and offline platforms. I am very grateful to Dr. Arun Rai, our TCS, Teachers Council Secretary, and senior colleague who always motivate and support us in this connection. Thanks to Professor C.R. Pathak, Chief Patron of Regional Science Association of India and retired Professor of IIT Kharagpur, Professor Bandyopadhyay, Calcutta University, Professor Ghosh, Maulana Azad College, and lastly, Joydev De, the Secretary, and the Rukhsana Begum as a convener of this seminar. So thank you all. Last but not the least, I heartily congratulate to all of the participants for their active participation in this event. We got technical support from Saurabh Das. So thank you, Dr. Das. So I think there is no other issue or other announcement from the convener end. So with this few words and the kind message, we now move to the end of our today's seminar. Thank you. Thanks to all.
I just wanted to. Hello.
Hello, I think Dr. Chatterjee wants to share something.
Yeah. Just only one sentence. Hello? on the part of the people, the participants, organization. I really I want to tell you that this was a very interesting session. And one thing I have noticed here, I have been involved worldwide in many situations like this, but Barasat College, it's not like Presidency College or IIM or management, but the excellent management of the whole system, and there's no disruptions. Everything was quite right. I was really amazed that a local college, not the big institutes like IIM, Joka, like that, can manage the thing so properly and well. As a professor of management science, I really appreciate their ability to conduct the whole thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. Chatterjee. And thank you, Rukhsana, for putting so much hard work.
No, actually, it's a teamwork. We all have done and really engaged in this. And thank you, everybody, for enjoying this webinar. And lastly, I want to say that it's a really fruitful webinar. And with this, we like to close officially today's webinar. Thank you once again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.